I'd like to call the Mentor City Council regular meeting of Tuesday, October 17, 2017 to order. The invocation will be given this evening by Councilman Blake.
Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for this day. Help us to use good judgment for the business at hand and guide us in wisdom with a continuing sense of truth and fairness for the community we represent.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Here.
Mr. Donovan?
Here.
Mrs. Dowling?
Here.
Mr. Kirchner?
Here.
Mr. Krieger?
Here.
Mr. Landig?
Here.
Mr. Marne?
Here.
And council's receipt of the minutes of the regular meeting on October 3rd, 2017.
Move to approve. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Councilman Meyer would like to make a statement at this time.
Mrs. President, the rest of the council, administration, and city of Mentor, I have to stand corrected. I forgot a very important subject last meeting. And I'd like to congratulate the Lake Catholic Girls golf team head coach, our very own Tony Zampedro.
Yeah.
We came in 5th place in the districts, almost made it to regionals. They were what, 5th out of 17?
5th out of 17.
5th out of 17. So we've all seen Tony play, so we know where the girls get it from. So congratulations, and congratulations to the girls.
Quite the opposite.
And it was something like, what, a 50-stroke improvement over?
Yeah, over last year, we
Over last
improved by
year, so
almost
it's
50
huge.
strokes.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations to the girls.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to public hearings. The first public hearing for ordinance number 17-0-101, and this public hearing is being held pursuant to notice duly published and posted according to law. Julie?
An ordinance amending Part 11, Title 5, Chapter 1173 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Mentor 2006 as amended, the same related to off-street parking and loading, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak?
Thank you, Madam President. Momentarily here, Mr. Traub, I think is, give you some show and tell on this? Mr. Traub?
I don't have any show and tell, but
Okay.
I do
Let
on
me,
subsequent reports.
Okay, well, let me open our comments on this. Essentially, the only change in here that's substantive deals with the inclusion of Section 117310, which is parking lot safety standards. And several members of this council were also former members of the Planning Commission, and you know that it's been routine over the years to ask developers, either on multiple lots or on single lot developments, to protect the public in areas where they may have outdoor seating. Typically, that's been done with bollards, but we've really never had any standards for these protective type of devices. And so one of the things that we were confronted with this year was one particular business in town that put up some large concrete barriers as a safety measure, and it really made us realize that without a standard to follow, it's very difficult for the Planning Commission to move forward and evaluate these situations where safety is a concern and pedestrian safety or consumer safety is potentially at risk. So what we wanted to do is offer some guidelines that ultimately the Planning Commission has adopted, recommended, I should say, to council for your consideration, that include standards that speak to aesthetics, speak to size in terms of scale of the building, in terms of providing engineering standards so that low-level impacts will actually stop vehicles and do their intended task in order to protect the public, and again, provide some structure within which the Planning Commission can review proposals of this type. So, Mr. Traub, did you want to add anything to that?
I think it's been, you adequately summarized it. The only point I would make is the fact that this was not, as you undoubtedly noted from the staff report, that this was not, the standards were not created locally in-house by department, but rather from the Texas A&M Traffic Safety Institute, and also another organization, interestingly enough, entitled the Storefront Safety Council. So two professional organizations taking a look at data nationally, again, which is summarized in the staff report. And we've had our share of accidents here in the city of Mentor with individuals either by design or by accident running into buildings. This code amendment will protect those that are perhaps most vulnerable by sitting outside during a meal. Thank you.
I would also point out to council, this doesn't compel any business owner for placing any type of structure in front of their property unless it's required, as I said, in cases where the planning commission, as part of a site review, will say, we desire that level of enhanced safety. But some businesses, by their nature or by their choice, may just want to enhance their own safety standards, lower their risk for whatever reason, and this allows a framework for them to do so.
Okay. Is there anyone that wishes to speak in favor of this? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Okay. Council's in receipt of all correspondence received pertaining to this matter. This public hearing is adjourned. The next public hearing is for ordinance number 17-0-102, and this public hearing is being held in accordance pursuant to notice duly published and posted according to law. Julie?
An ordinance amending the codified ordinances of the City of Mentor 2006 as amended, and the official zoning map by rezoning of 2.61 acres from R4 Single Family Residential District to RVG Village Green District at 9120 and 9168 Jackson Street.
Mr. Filipiak, any comment?
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Traub, please.
Thank you. As council will recall, this subdivision is one that council as well as planning commission have spent some considerable time in reviewing, and the developer has an opportunity now to expand and I think from a planning standpoint actually improve that development. What I'd like to do would be to share with you, as I do, an aerial photograph and subdivision plan of that development that will illustrate what I'll be presenting. Thank you.
Okay.
Council will remember the rezoning presentation that had been made several months ago relative to the rezoning of this property and the creation of a RVG development, and the questions and concerns relative to preservation of the land area up front as a conservation zone, but also from a practical standpoint, this area was a potential floodplain area, so not developable, but also well-suited for preservation. As a result of further study, conversations were held with abutting property owners, and the developer has come up with a larger plan, as is the subject of this rezoning this evening, to add approximately 2.6 acres to the development, and interestingly enough provides a new subdivision plan that I'd like to present for your consideration. This, of course, was included in the packet. You notice the property both to the east along the south side of Jackson Street, but also on the west side. the creation, instead of just a cul-de-sac street coming in, it now loops around. They have lots that, if you will, take advantage of the creekside view, as well as surrounding the perimeter outline of the development. There were a number of concerns that had been addressed by the Planning Commission. Let me briefly review those. Number one was relative to the Wayside Creek that I had previously mentioned. There was concern as to the development observing, if you will, the conservation protection zone and making sure that there was an appropriate setback from that area. And that has been addressed, as you see in the proposed rezoning plan. And I would note that Planning Commission will get an additional opportunity to review in detail this development. This evening, again, we're going through the rezoning. Traffic was another consideration along Jackson Street. Even the addition of several units was restudied, and according to the traffic impact study, the number of trips to be generated as a result of this development did not exceed 100, and therefore a traffic impact study was not required. Planning Commission, as a result of this new cul-de-sac street alignment, will need to waive the 600-foot requirement that we have in place in our Code of Ordinances to allow this development to proceed. As you'll note, there are 20 approximately ranch-style homes as they've been described. Again, that'll be situated around the development. The residents will own their own home, and there will be an exclusive area that they will own as well. However, the area depicted in the olive color, if you will be common open space. But I think more importantly, going to the discussion that Council had at their work session relative to useful open space, I think the area along Jackson Street serves the spirit of that discussion. Pertaining to the area of open space, the requirement is 15%, and the developers in excess of 22% of that. Again, Council in their discussions relative to RVG had talked about the enhancements that could be added in terms of benches and gazebos. At this point in time, at this stage of the development, the developer is simply looking at maintaining the area in a natural condition. Another point of conversation was relative to access to Springbrook Gardens Park. That's depicted on the plan and obviously subject to the city's final plan in terms of whether that type of provision can be made. At the September 2017 Planning Commission meeting, it was recommended by a vote of 7-0 to approve the development with the 5 conditions that are outlined on the staff report in your possession. Thank you.
Would the applicant like to have anything they'd like to add? Please come forward and identify yourself, please.
Good evening, Greg Summers, Summers Real Estate Group. Since proposing the initial plan for Creekside Farm, we have acquired the parcels directly adjoining the community of the east and west. We do feel that these parcels will positively enhance the development plan, and it also increased the site distance from a traffic safety perspective. And acquiring the additional parcels also took care of a potential headlight issue with the neighboring property owner, so that worked out well. But we feel that, like I said, we feel that the additional parcels will enhance the overall plan, and we think it'll be a great new community in addition to the city, and we would respectfully request approval.
Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor? Anyone that would like to speak in opposition? Okay, hearing none. Council's in receipt of all correspondence received pertaining to this matter. This public hearing is adjourned. The next public hearing is for ordinance number 17-0-103, and the public hearing is being held pursuant to notice duly published and posted according to law. Julie?
An ordinance amending the codified ordinances of the City of Mentor 2006 as amended and the official zoning map by rezoning of 15.56 acres from R4 Single Family Residential District to RVG Village Green District at 7910 King Memorial Road.
Mr. Filipiak?
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Traub, please.
Thank you, and again, with council's indulgence, I'll take advantage of the overhead. Thank you. A whisper from the audience, and my exhibit was I wonder if I could trouble you here, Ron. Oh, thank you. Well, that's never happened. As the initial ordinance indicated, what's being proposed with this development would require a rezoning. We're looking at a proposed rezoning of approximately 15.7 acres on the west side of King Memorial. Well, there is an existing house that we'll be talking about in a moment, but otherwise largely an undeveloped site. The Planning Commission had previously discussed this development. There was a different layout plan that was initially discussed, had proposed a cul-de-sac development, but you'll note in this case, there was certainly an opportunity to bring that street back around. That was in fact done, but it results in the elimination of a historic home on the property. And by the use of the word historic, the house is well in excess of 100 years. The issue as to its condition is also discussed in the staff report and was the subject of a rather extensive study by the developer. Certainly from the administration standpoint, the Planning Commission standpoint, it would have been desirable to retain the home and integrate it into the subdivision, as has been done with several other developments in the city where historic properties have been incorporated into existing developments. In this case, both because of the orientation of the roadway, and according to the developer's study, the cost to renovate the house was significant, and it indicated that the total cost to renovate the property would have been almost $500,000. That being said, the decision was made to at this point to propose demolition of the home and the completion of the cul-de-sac, well, the looped street system. The plan would include, in this case, a public right-of-way, and the street itself would be dedicated. There are sufficient services available, as is indicated by letters from Aqua Ohio and the sanitary engineer to service the development. Trip generation study, as I made reference to earlier, was performed on this property. And again, the anticipated traffic impact from this project is not significant to warrant a full traffic impact study. You'll note that the subdivision has lots somewhat conventionally coming off the Loop Street, but the setbacks do vary to take advantage of views or natural amenities that occur on the site, and to provide a little bit more interest as opposed to having a setback as we do with some of the older developments that occur in town. Another topic of discussion at the Planning Commission level was relative to the green space, et cetera, and you'll note on the north side of the development are areas that both would serve as for stormwater detention and for open space conservation, and their development is actually surrounded by a modest green belt. I would note that on the south side of the development, that green belt does get rather modest, and candidly, in the discussions that council had relative to Village Green, we may actually want to look to eliminate that and simply bring the property lines to the rear of the property, as opposed to creating kind of a 10 to 15 foot no man's land between the rear yards of these individuals and the rear yards of folks on the adjacent street to the south. As I mentioned, the detention, there will be a stormwater detention basin constructed as a part of this. I think in addition to the historic home, the other very significant challenge was relative to the site's proximity to the Hidden Hollow development and the issues relative to the development of this property on the existing homes that were downstream. And there were significant conversations relative to this, and a engineered proposal has been proposed, which would seem to rectify the system. Again, this was recommended for approval by the Municipal Planning Commission, with two comments that remained. One being the conventional one relative to comments from the city engineer and fire department be addressed as a part of the subdivision plan, which they conventionally are. The second item was relative to the disposition of the house at 7910 King Memorial, which I previously mentioned was the historic home. And again, there is accompanying report relative to that property. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to?
Good evening again, Greg Summers, Summers Real Estate Group. Regarding the Woodlands and Menor, we've closely worked with the administration at this point to address all questions and concerns. And we have also proactively met with the HOA of Hidden Hollow to work with them and plan on doing everything we can and following through with that to alleviate the drainage issues. And just like Creekside Farm, we feel that it'll be a great new community, and we'd request approval. Thank you.
Is there anyone present that would like to speak in favor of this development? Anyone we can speak in opposition? Okay, hearing none. Council is in receipt of all correspondence received pertaining to this matter, and this public hearing is adjourned. New legislation, ordinance number 17-0-101.
An ordinance amending Part 11, Title 5, Chapter 1173 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Menor, 2006, as amended, the same related to off-street parking and loading, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Philippia?
Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen? Gentlemen?
No, sorry.
No? Okay. No comments? No motion?
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll. Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes. Move for passage.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Ordinance number 17-0-101 has been approved. Ordinance number 17-0-102.
An ordinance amending the codified ordinances of the City of Mentor 2006 as amended and the official zoning map by rezoning of 2.6 acres from R4 Single Family Residential District to RVG Village Green District at 9120 and 9168 Jackson Street.
Mr. Flippia?
Thank you, Madam President. I actually just might ask for the Assistant Law Director to chime in on a question. Really, I think we've kind of recently experienced, and we've certainly experienced in the past, some issues with the common areas in RVG districts failing to be maintained, and ultimately HOAs come in and out of existence or become less active over time. And I know that Mr. Hennig has expressed that concern to the auditor's office. There really hasn't been any changes on that. And I'm wondering if we might consider, or if it's even an option to consider, whether or not some type of deed restriction on those areas might be appropriate, or a conservation easement. So the concern on our end simply being that if they fall into foreclosure at some point, the worry is that they get picked up by someone who is not a public entity and either not maintained, or this council or future councils and planning commissions are hearing appeals for development of those areas. Obviously, the zoning still maintains them as common areas, but I'm wondering, Mr. Zeman, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. We did address this issue in front of the Planning Commission, and as Mr. Filipiak indicated, we have had some recurring issues in some of our RVG districts. That tended to be a function of the fact that we had dedicated public streets and the common areas were separately parceled. After a while, due to indifference or other factors, the association may dissolve. They go into tax arrears, they end up in foreclosure, and we've had a few headache situations where subsequent purchasers demanded the ability to develop those. This specific proposal, though, is a little bit different. It's sort of a hybrid. Basically, the way it's structured is the common areas are all going to be under ownership of the association, so a single parcel. The actual unit owners then are going to own not just their structures, but called a property unit block. So the applicant can probably correct me a little bit better, but generally around the footprint of the actual structure, you're going to own in fee simple the land underneath you. Everything around that, however, including all the improvements, the roadways, the common open space, is going to be owned by the association. So the ability of that association to then dissolve and allow those open spaces to fall into foreclosure is extremely limited in these instances because, again, that's their common infrastructure. If they were going to be publicly dedicated and we were dealing with further subdivided parcels, that would be a massive concern for us based on our recent history. So I think the confidence level with this particular proposal can be fairly high that problem won't happen. But nonetheless, I think making it clear that there shall be no further lot splits that may allow for that open space to be subdivided in the future and get into that situation that Mr. Filipiak outlined is an important component of this rezoning.
Ken, did you have anything else?
Is that limitation on lot splits, Mr. Zeman, one of the conditions?
It's not. Typically, we would treat that at the administrative level. I think it would be hard for them to get a conforming lot split, although with the frontage along Jackson Street, that may be possible. So it may be appropriate to indicate a condition that the open space not be further subdivided.
I think that could be useful over time from the administrative standpoint. It really doesn't impact the development one way or the other, but if council might want to entertain additional condition that Mr. Zeman might offer, crafting some language on, I don't think it could hurt.
Any comments on that?
address?
Come forward.
I would suggest in other communities, what we've done is put a note on the plat, and that prevents on the condominium plat, we actually put a note on there that the property can't be subdivided or further sold away from the association. And we would be willing to do that as a condition of approval.
That's excellent.
Would we have to make a change on this evening?
Could have a stipulation.
Could add a motion to amend the ordinance to add that further condition.
Okay. Do I have that motion?
Well, I don't think we're there yet. We're not done discussing, all right?
Okay. Any other comments, gentlemen?
I do.
Yes, Mr. Herschel.
Question for the developer. The centerpiece common property, so you have an easement through there? Is that correct?
It actually isn't an easement. The association owns all the property other than the blocks that they spoke of. So the association, there would not be an easement. They own all that property.
Okay, so it depicts on there, it seems to be a pathway going from one property line through that common area. Is that correct?
Bear with me.
Unless I'm missing, it looks like you have a path that's going through
Is
there.
that the path that goes over to the park? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, yeah, so it's access there.
We are at this time going to reserve that space for hopefully access to the park in the future, because we think that would be an asset not only for this community, but for the communities across the street and Michael Drive in Connecticut Colony that might want to walk through the subdivision to get to the park or ride their bikes.
So that what you have there now is not really what's going to be there unless it happens later. It's not part of this plan then. So you're showing a path right next to a driveway there. If I'm one of your sublots. And then it goes through that common area, but it shows a path apparently eventually connecting to Springbrook Garden Park, possibly.
It was requested at the Planning Commission level that we provide a sidewalk for access to the public along that private drive coming in, which is we felt was a good idea. So there is a sidewalk next to that driveway, and then it comes back into that open space in the middle where there's parking. And then eventually, we'd like to see it go to the park. But that, I think, will be a function of how the park develops and if that is deemed desirable by the city.
Okay, just so I'm clear, that the east property line where you show this depicts what appears to be, what you said, a sidewalk. It goes into all the way through that park area in the center of the
Correct.
development. That's not part of the plan right now.
I think that would be addressed at the subdivision plan approval at the next stage of Planning Commission. But that is our intent, and we would like to see that. So we would address that with the final plan at the Planning Commission.
Okay, I just want to be clear because it looks like it's a good plan. I mean, if you're going to put access to it, I just want to.
That is our
Picked
intention.
it on here, and I just wondered if it's part of the plan. That's why I was glad to see that. But I wanted to and similarly, I noticed on your other plan on King Memorial, you have the same access type thing. So
Correct.
I would just address it at this point. So
Thank you.
Any other comments, gentlemen? Mr. Marne?
Question for the administration, or maybe it's a legal question. The park area in the front along Jackson Street is about 1 3/4 acres. How does it stated? I mean, does that have to stay open space in terms of open space that can be used, say, to play catch or things of that nature? Or can that be an area that, say, hey, the homeowners association wants it to, like how we're growing up the rough areas of Blackbrook, to create a division between Jackson Street and the creek and the rest of the development.
Do you want to respond to that, Mr. Trump?
As it's initially been envisioned, it would be left in a natural condition.
I would just add to that, generally speaking, we don't really monitor how that green space might be used. Obviously, if someone were to construct a structure on it, that would change. If they would let it grow up in a natural state, we would still be subject to our zoning code
course, right.
and nuisance codes, so we would, of course, enforce that.
Okay.
And in fact, the issues that I referred to earlier are very often related to a lack of maintenance on these properties, where the grass grows up and no one's there from the association to take care of it. The city takes care of it, especially assessed, and then it ultimately starts down that path toward foreclosure, which has been the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, gentlemen?
I would move to amend the conditions of approval to read, "Shall be no further subdivision of open space parcels."
Second.
Julie, please call the roll. Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to suspend as amended?
Second?
Please call the roll. Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to approve as amended?
Second?
Please call the roll. Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance number 17-0-102 has been approved as amended.
We're getting good.
Ordinance number 17-0-103.
An ordinance amending the codified ordinances of the City of Mentor 2006 as amended and the official zoning map by rezoning of 15.56 acres from R4 Single Family Residential District to RVG Village Green District at 7910 King Memorial Road.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Madam President, and obviously the same concern would exist, so perhaps Mr. Seaman can offer the best way to address that in this particular instance.
In this, Madam President, in this particular instance, it is a concern. Obviously, those are some significant areas, and unlike the prior, where we have property unit blocks, these parcels are a little bit different. Now, granted, it's not proposed that there's going to be a public dedication here, so it's mitigated a little bit. The concern, obviously, tends to be the stormwater management infrastructure, long-term maintenance of that. Can be something that the associations want to divest themselves of, and the best way of doing that is just massive indifference, dissolve the association, and let it fall into tax arrears. So I don't necessarily have a perfect solution for that in this particular instance. Although again, I think the fact is that while the parcels are bigger than the prior property unit blocks that you just saw along Jackson Street, nonetheless, some of those mitigating factors are also present here if you're dealing with non-dedicated streets. But it's a magnified concern with this particular development.
Same amendment?
In the past, we've gotten really creative and tried to extend the parcel lines to actually include some of those areas of infrastructure, but I don't know how that works with this. You'd have some really bowling alley lots if you were to try to do that.
Any other comments, Mr. Filipiak?
Have we in the past explored the idea of a restricted deed just on those parcels, since it is a separate parcel?
Well, we will have easements over them, so it's not the development issue, I think, in this particular instance that we'd have to be concerned
Just the
of.
maintenance issue.
All right, it's very long term, because on a long enough horizon, be it 30 or 40 years, things just change, and we're now dealing with the consequences of that long horizon today with some of the prior RPG districts that were approved that long ago.
Are we taking easements over the areas that are not part of the stormwater management system?
I don't believe that's been proposed, no.
Yeah,
We do have a mechanism to take a conservation easement over those areas, assuming it qualifies legally speaking. We haven't actually gone through that due diligence to ascertain whether or not a conservation easement would be appropriate. That did occur in the Villages on Maple project, as the council is aware, as an additional item of legal protection for that open space. That may be something that could be explored with this as well.
Madam President?
Yes, Mr. Blake?
Yeah, I'd like to shift gears a little bit from that if we're done with that conversation. And I wanted to talk a moment or two about the 1884 house at King Memorial. And maybe if I could have Mr. Summers come up and kind of give us an overview of what you found in your structural study. And matter of fact, a few weekends ago, Rick Summers and I had gone through the house and studied it. And my impression, very disappointed at the condition of the house. From the outside, it looks infinitely better than what you find structurally inside, especially pertaining to the basement area. And one of the middle load-bearing beams looked like it had been removed. So I was wondering if you could just speak to that study that you had done. Although all the cost estimates on renovating that house, I don't agree with all of them, but it would be a significant cost for somebody to bring that structure up to, even close to present-day code. So to me, it's just not viable to keep that house. But it is a disappointment to see an antiquity leave, but it's just in very poor shape. So if you could spend a moment for us and just kind of explain what you looked at and what your study had found.
Absolutely. We had a professional that had extensive experience with historic properties, and we actually had several of reputable contractors that we know look at this. And part of the original plan, we actually planned on preserving the house
Right.
before we looped the street. So, we actually intended on saving the house. And as we got into it, it was just, the foundation walls were buckling. There was mold problems. I guess a gentleman lived there for like 50 years, and he literally just went in without permits and chopped up wood-bearing beams, and there was exposed plumbing, wires. The furnace where, the carbon monoxide is vented out, it had no vent on it. There was open water. It was way beyond practical repair. And the other issue that we were concerned about is that there's no way a bank would ever finance that. And unfortunately, the people that had bought it wanted to take it on and restore it and have that historic character. And it was just, they got way overwhelmed with it, and it was way beyond their ability. So even if somebody could have bought it, I don't think they'd ever get any type of financing on it. And, there was legitimate safety hazards too, not just aesthetic, but
Agreed.
we really tried to do as much due diligence as we could to see if there was a way to save it or integrate it into the plan. It was in really bad shape, and I don't think there was any scenario. We talked, like I said, several very experienced people, and unfortunately, it was just way beyond repair.
Yeah.
So it was unfortunate, but I do think that we did everything we could to try to come to that conclusion and make sure that was
Yeah.
absolutely the fact. But
It's unfortunate that, we lose a piece of metal like that, but it's just in too much of a disrepair. And if I could, Madam President, we've talked about the Hidden Hollow drainage problems next door, and this isn't part of a zoning question, but could you just give us a quick overview of a thought that you had in terms of the choke point on their drainage that we might be able to alleviate?
yeah, I'm gonna actually ask my father Rick to come up because he was at the last meeting and
Great.
has a little bit better grasp on the plan there. So
Thank you.
The issue with Hidden Hollow is, again, they're an active association, they are maintaining their properties, but the original design was very poor. The ditch goes along the west side of our property line, and then when it turns east, it makes a 90-degree turn. Very impracticable, especially an open ditch. When all that water comes running down there, it can't make a right turn. I think what we're going to propose, again, at the subdivision level, is in that green space area in our northwest corner, we're either going to allow them to put we have to stay out of the wetland, but we're going to allow them to put in a curved
Right.
ditch with possibly an easement so that it will eliminate that water situation. Right now, unfortunately, it runs right at the back of somebody's house. So we will work closely with our engineer and the association to come up with a plan. The other thing is all the water now, this is the site drains from the southeast to the northwest, so all the surface water on that site now is traveling to that northwest corner. When we put our pond in and our storm sewers, it'll resolve a lot of that water that's coming from the southeast right now. But we did work actively, and it's a good association, and we had a good rapport with them, and I think that we have a common issue to solve here, and we will do that.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Blake, is that, are you finished?
Yes, I'm finished.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam
Yes, Mr. Kirschner.
I believe Mr. Straub recommended the removal of the property, the green space devil strip, if you will, along the south property line. And I think that would be another recommendation for an amendment to the plan. And if there's no other questions, or I'll make the amendments if you want.
Would you please?
Okay, I would move the conditions of approval to read that there shall be no further subdivision of open space parcel, and on the recommendation of the staff, the removal of the open space along the southern property line, I believe from sublot 17 to 23.
Second.
Please call the roll. Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to suspend as amended?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
So what was the final decision that we made on the water situation and how it's going to be part of the plat and things of that nature? Because that corner, you know, as Rick mentioned, that's a very bad design, and Hidden Hollow brings all that water down from 84 to the west end of Hidden Hollow, and those poor people at the curve of that road have been flooded multiple times in our 3 storms of the century that we had 3 times in 6 years? 6 years. So I just don't want to see this falling by the wayside in years to come, so that it's a continual problem, because once we solve the problem, I want to make sure it's solved indefinitely.
Madam President, can I respond?
Yes, Mr. Kirschner.
Is that something we need to put in the record, Joe, for the planning commission to address, or is that going to be addressed for sure?
Certainly, the making the record and conveying that to the planning commission, I think would be a good housekeeping item. But I do, even in the absence of that, I think that is something that they would definitely address at that level. But again, it's there's certainly no harm in putting an exclamation point on that issue.
I'd feel more comfortable.
So guide us in the.
So how do we
We're about
amend-
halfway through.
How do we amend the amendment?
Re-amend the amendment.
You want to further amend the amendment, so.
Well,
Second amendment, that's
Yes.
probably,
Or I could remove my amendment.
well, how about a second amendment and just modifying the initial amendment? I think that ought to suffice. So, I don't know.
All right, so I'll say yes, and then a second amendment.
Mm-hmm.
Because that supersedes whatever came before, just as any amendment supersedes what's presently.
Okay.
So
So
would I-
yes, so that'll do that, and then do a second amendment,
So
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Have at it.
Okay, so second amendment due to current water problems in the northwest corner of the proposed future development to be further reviewed by Planning Commission and per our request. That'd be good?
Sounds good.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to approve as doubly amended.
All right.
There we go.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance number 17-0-103 has been approved as doubly amended. Ordinance number 17-0-104.
An ordinance approving a minor subdivision at 9110 and 9120 Jackson Street and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Trout, please.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. Again, we had spent some time talking about this development a few moments ago. One of the issues is relative to a side property line, and rather than get up and show you on the overhead, I would just direct your attention to the plat of survey, which is included as an exhibit, and it simply it depicts in red what's being proposed in terms of the property line, being shifted slightly to the east. What that does is to provide some additional buffer for the resident that will not be included as a part of the subdivision. The reason it's being brought before council is that while the lot area will be conforming, the lot width, which is currently non-conforming, still won't meet that, even though it's been made slightly wider. It'll increase it from 60 to 65 feet, where the requirement is 100 feet. So you're improving the situation by making this adjustment, but we're still not creating a conforming lot. Again, Planning Commission recommended the approval of the minor subdivision, and if you feel it necessary, I can certainly go up and display it for further clarification. Thank you.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Ordinance number 17-0-104 has been approved. Ordinance number 17-0-105.
An ordinance amending the plat of Lakeshore Highlands subdivision, Phase 1, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Trout, please.
Thank you. Members of council, again, I think the exhibit clarifies the situation for your review. Sublot number 1, which would be the proposed model home site, the applicant is proposing to increase the front building setback. What that will do will be to provide a more conforming setback for the 3 lots that come in off of Blackbrook. That's really the simple explanation for that. It will also create an opportunity by moving the house closer to the street, create an opportunity should there be any improvements to the rear of the property. And again, I would note that the Planning Commission recommended approval of the modification of the front setback at their September 28th meeting. If there are any questions.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Ordinance number 17-0-105 has been approved. Ordinance number 17-0-106.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of bonds in the maximum principal amount of $3 million for the purpose of refunding and debt charges savings certain of the city's outstanding various proposed bonds, Series 2009, dated July 30th, 2009, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Madam President. And This is, the purpose of this ordinance is to try to improve upon the finance rate for some outstanding past debt. Mr. Malinowski?
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. Members of council, this ordinance as well as the subsequent ordinance comprise our proposed recent bond issuance. These are not to exceed amounts, $3 million on this ordinance and $2.25 on the next ordinance. We would anticipate being well below that, below the $5 million threshold when these are ultimately issued. The refunding of the 2009 bonds will hopefully generate in the neighborhood of $150,000 of savings on the duration of the bonds. These were various purpose bonds for the renovation of the municipal court, Isley Road costs, several other infrastructure projects were combined into that series. And I would recommend approval of this ordinance. Thank you.
Gentlemen,
Move to suspend.
please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ms. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes. Move for passage.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ms. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Ordinance number 17-0-106 has been approved. Ordinance number 17-0-107.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of bonds in the maximum principal amount of $2,250,000 for the purpose of paying costs of improving Springbrook Gardens Park by constructing and improving asphalt paths, driveways, surface parking areas, and drainage facilities, together with the necessary appurtenances thereto for city park and recreational purposes, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Madam President. And as the Finance Director pointed out, this will be a part of the same bond issuance as the refunding. This will the purposes of these funds will be used for the majority of what we've been referring to as Phase 1 improvements at Springbrook Gardens Park.
Move to suspend.
Just one
Mr.
question,
Baker.
Administration. Under the retention of our municipal advisor, can we get an idea of, it says the firm shall be paid just and reasonable compensation for those advisory services and should be reimbursed for the actual out-of-pocket expenses. Can we have an idea of what amount we're talking about there?
I don't recall the exact amount, but the financial advisor that we have been using has been giving us a fixed rate amount. Obviously, there are some variable costs in travel to the rating agency,
Right.
and that'll be added in to the total. But it's, I don't recall off the top of my head.
A range?
Provide that information to
Yeah, but we'll
council.
certainly get that for you.
Okay.
It's usually just a percentage of the deal.
What's that?
It's usually just a percentage of the deal.
Mr. Crater answered, but again, we've been using our financial advisor for a number of years, and frankly, he's been very economical for us. You're correct, in the past, usually it's tied to a percentage. Ours is not, it's a fixed cost, and frankly, we believe it to be to our advantage to not do it based off of a percentage, so. It's a good
Okay.
better deal for us, in our opinion.
Whatever you say. Trust me, they figure it out as a percentage of the deal. Go ahead.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ms. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ms. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Ordinance number 17-0-107 has been approved. Ordinance number 17-0-108.
An ordinance adopting the City of Mentor financial and debt policy and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Madam President, members of council, and we had the opportunity earlier this evening to go over this policy in greater detail, in great detail. And essentially, to summarize this, and I'll turn it over to the Finance Director to offer you a few more specifics about the body of it for the public's consumption. But essentially, this memorializes some of the strong financial and management practices that we have had in place for many years now. It also makes reference to many of the special funds that we use in order to provide some protection and our risk over time and changes in the economy, and provide adequate reserves. Mr. Malinowski?
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. That pretty much summarizes the purpose of the policy is to adopt a comprehensive financial and debt policy, and basically to memorialize what we've been doing for the last several decades, and this only adds to the leverage and clout when we meet with rating agencies. That it's in written document form. Thank you.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Ordinance number 17-0-108 has been approved. Ordinance number 17-0-109.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Zerby Construction LLC for the construction of a handicapped accessible restroom at Menor Civic City Pool and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Kaminsky, please.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak, members of council. Bids were opened October 11th, 2017 for the Mentor Civic Center Pool Handicap Accessible Restroom Addition. One bid was received for the project and within the engineer's estimate of $60,000. The bid was received from Zerby Construction LLC of Mentor, Ohio, whose bid was found to be in conformance with all contract requirements. It is therefore recommended that the contract be awarded to Zerby Construction in the amount of $59,000, with the completion of this project to be scheduled for May 2018. Thank you.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Mr. Donovan.
Madam President, just a surprising one bid. People must be busy. One bid came in on that, yeah. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Move to suspend.
And rate at the probable cost.
Uh-huh.
And within 1,000 was probable cost. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Ordinance number 17-0-109 has been approved. Resolution number 17-R-124.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to file an application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Public Works Commission for the purpose of acquiring funds through the State Capital Improvement Program for the Hopkins Road resurfacing project and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Madam President, members of council, and this is my opportunity to congratulate our engineering staff on the strong work that they did in putting together applications in this last round of OPWC funding. We believe that in the preliminary scoring through the integrating committee, we will be able to see some funding for two projects here in the community. Approximately $150,000 in grant dollars for the resurfacing of Hopkins Road, and about $500,000 grant money toward the future total reconstruction of Orchard Road. So you'll see three. Mr. Swigger, could you offer some details on the scope of the project? You'll see three ordinances for three projects. The third, which we submitted for the construction of the detention facility on the Rice School property, did not get funded, but it's just under the funding threshold. So in the event that some money gets returned or other projects may not go forward, there's an outside shot that it could see some funding. So we want to submit the application. But Mr. Swigger?
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. Regarding the Hopkins Road resurfacing project, the project is expected to cost approximately $460,000. It'll be partially funded with approximately a $150,000 grant and a $50,000 loan from the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement Program. Project will resurface Hopkins Road from Menor Avenue to State Route 84. That's about 1.25 miles in length. It also includes the remaining full-depth pavement repairs that we started in the past year or so. Project also includes a leveling course and a surface course on Hopkins Road. Thank you.
Madam President,
Yes, Mr. Blake.
I would like to echo Ken's congratulations to the engineering staff. And I could speak just to Hopkins Road in Ward 1. The patches have kept it going, but this is going to be great to have a nice, smooth surface down Hopkins all the way between 84 and Menor Avenue. So congratulations, engineering staff, for getting this funding, and that way we can get it done. Time frame on this, Ken? Is that midsummer, I think we had talked about?
Yeah,
Where
Immediately after July 1st of
somewhere after
2018.
July 1st?
Yes.
And how long would that take? A month or so?
It'll be a little under 3 months, 2.5 months, 2
2.5
months.
months?
Mhm.
Excellent, excellent, thank you.
Hopefully, we'll be able to get it, our goal would be to have it ready to be bid right on July 1st and get it in before school opens, because that Hopkins School corridor there is pretty active with school buses.
The only way it could be better is with some bike lanes.
Future
I know.
consideration there.
They're expensive. Thank you.
Gentlemen?
Mr. Blake?
I'd like to move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes. Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Resolution number 17-R-124 has been adopted. Resolution number 17-R-125.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to file an application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Public Works Commission for the purpose of acquiring funds through the State Capital Improvement Program for the Orchard Road Reconstruction Project and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Madam President, members of council. And of course, this project is consistent with the city's commitment to eventually reach its long-term plan of reconstructing and/or significantly upgrading all of those headlands, roads, streets that are west of Corduroy Road. Of course, Marigold is under contract, and we'll see a lot of construction on that activity out there soon. But this would be the next, or what we would think of as the second phase. Mr. Swigger.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. The project will reconstruct Orchard Road over its entire length, very similar to the Marigold Road project that the city manager had just mentioned. The project is expected to cost approximately $3 million. It's being partially funded by a $500,000 grant and a $150,000 loan from the Ohio Public Works Commission. The overall length of Orchard Road is about 0.8 of a mile. The project also includes rehabilitation of sanitary sewer mains and laterals over the same length. And the project, as being part of the OPWC funding cycle, would not be expected to start until after July 1st of 2018.
Also add to that, one of the contributors to this is also Lake County Utilities, and in each of those phases, they'll contribute approximately $500,000 or so in upgraded utilities.
Correct.
Mr.
Just
Krieger.
want to thank the administration, everybody, for getting these road projects underway for the Menor Headlands. Those roads are in terrible shape, and this is a good start. And having said that,
Madam President. Now that we're commending people, I would also commend Councilman Krieger on his tenacity in getting these projects going. And with that kind of money, I'm sure these other 3 ward councilmen are going to knock on your door shortly, too. So.
Mr. Martin.
Is there a way, I mean, because I realize through OPWC that, it goes by each road. I mean, how can we make sure that, this isn't just one road or a series of roads, but basically a 10-year-long project that's going to be over $20 million by the time it's all said and done? So how do we do a better job of tying it together and get them to realize exactly what we're trying to do, so we don't run into, say, as for example, Route 84 from 306 to Garfield Road, and then just to get to 615 again?
Well, again, I think it's important to understand that we're pretty fortunate to be granted about $650,000 in this last OPWC funding. That's a competitive grant program. It includes several counties in our district, so we're not just competing against Lake County projects, we're competing against other counties for the same pool of money, and it's a limited amount. So for road projects, there aren't as many, for local road projects, there's not many sources out there of outside funding, and this is about the best one. And, you know, we've gotten, I think, better at the application process over the years. We've gotten some assistance and guidance from the Lake County Engineer's Office in helping us to put those better applications together better. But I think we're squeezing our fair share and perhaps then some out of each of these funding rounds. I think the unfortunate part is that these roads are original. They're of course they've been resurfaced, and that's been pointed out to you, Mr. Krieger. And but the base, I mean, these are original roads that were built in the 50s. So unfortunately, it would have been nice to have improved some of them or reconstructed some of them, 20, 30 years ago, and saw that. And so yes, today we are faced with, an estimate of about $20 million worth of improvement, and that's and unfortunately, we would like to be able to extend the time frame for that replacement as long as is feasible, and by feasible, what's manageable in the ward. Unfortunately, you look at condition of Marigold, and Orchard's not too far behind it. We're prioritizing these, but they need it now. Some of the other roads, I think we could probably extend the life on, and we're going to do our best to continue to seek out, in this case, OPWC funding. But there just aren't really a whole lot of other options for other than our own local dollars. And reflecting on your agenda here this evening and the discussion we had earlier in the work session, much of this bonded debt will over this year and perhaps in the next year will account for a good chunk of the local funding for these two roadways.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm extremely thankful. I mean, I'm sure council will say, hey, 20% on our roads, we'll take it. Or, if we did the same for $20 million, that's $4 million, you know what I mean? So,
right.
It's a lot. So, great job administration, and thank you for OPWC, but just what I'm saying is just, we spend a lot on roads, even when they're not our roads and they're state routes, you know what I mean? So, that's all I'm saying.
So, the
I
ability.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just how do we make sure
Well,
they...
I wish the pot was bigger,
Right.
the OPWC pot, but it's been good for us overall.
Okay. Thank you.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr.
Move to
Marne?
approve.
Yes. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Resolution number 17-R-125 has been adopted. Resolution number 17-R-126.
A resolution authorizing the city manager to file an application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Public Works Commission for the purpose of acquiring funds through the State Capital Improvement Program for the stormwater detention at Dale R. Rice School District and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Madam President, members of council. And again, this is not a funded project right now. We are submitting this application in the hope that there might be some money left over, that it can be funded. It would be our goal to continue forward with this project as we have termed Phase 1 of the detention at Dale Rice, and probably move forward with or without funding in 2018. Mr. Swigger, I think it might be helpful to make a few comments on the project itself.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. Yeah, Dale R. Rice Stormwater Detention Project. Overall, it's a project that will be located on about 18 acres of land. Basically taking lessons learned from our two-town detention basin project, we are going to be able to develop about a little over 2 acres of this property due to the wetlands on the property. But we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to improve stormwater detention and management in the area. We're hoping to be able to provide about 10 acre-feet of storage of detention. which should reduce a 10-year storm peak flow to about a 2-year storm in the area. So we're pretty confident that the developable portion of the property will be very beneficial. Thank you.
Mr. Landig.
Yeah, Madam President, thank you. Ken, you mentioned that it's a reservoir project, so likelihood it doesn't get funded this year. Will we still be putting in the Army Corps of Engineers application for Phase 2 this year to get that ball rolling? Because as City Engineer Swigger said, we learned some lessons there. I don't even think the Corps likes us to call it detention. We learned flood improvement, perhaps.
Enhancement.
But the Phase 1, Phase 2 might end up getting closer together if we are successful with the Phase 2 Army Corps permit, or what's the schedule looking like? Because the floods don't care whether we get funding or
Sure.
not.
Well, of course, and we've had a lot of discussion on this, and council has had a lot of discussion on this collectively. It's important for us to move forward with an improvement there, and of course, we'll be doing our construction in areas that do not include any wetland areas. So it does not require, what we're doing will not require a permit. Answer your question directly, yes, we will look to pursue that permit. I think before moving forward with that, obviously we have to evaluate the cost associated with that and plan Phase 2. So it's difficult to put a time frame on Phase 2, but we want to get some immediate benefit in 2018, or at least get the ball rolling in 2018, so that we can see some relief in that area shortly thereafter. So we'd like to pursue that. We have had a wetland delineation done on the property, as you know. There are varying degrees of wetlands on the property. So, Mr. Swigger, do you have a sense yet of where we might go to start that permitting process?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we actually met with our environmental consultant last week regarding Phase 2 and really how to get that process started. So I mean, we just really started that discussion, but we've basically identified about a 50% increase in the volume of the basin that we feel that we can go and attempt to get a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. So we do have a Phase 2 in mind, and we'll be working with them with our consultant to go forward with an application.
Thank you for the update. Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Ms. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Resolution number 17-R-126 has been adopted. Resolution number 17-R-127.
A resolution designating Councilman Ray Kirchner serving on behalf of council.
Mr. Zeman.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of council, Ohio law requires elected officials once per term to attend an approved training session regarding the requirements of Ohio public records law. It's basically a seminar that you go to. Ohio law also allows you, a public body, to designate a specific individual to obtain that training, and by designating that individual, you've each brought yourselves into compliance. I recommend you, even if you're planning on attending one of those training sessions, nonetheless, it is a mandatory audit item, so life happens, and if you miss, a session that you plan on going, by having a designate, you'll still be in compliance with Ohio law. So I do recommend you do this as a housekeeping measure.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Thank you, Mr. Kirchner, yes.
Mr. Landig?
Taking one for the team.
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Resolution number 17-R-127 has been adopted. Second readings, we have none. Third readings, we have none. Managers report.
Thank you, Madam President, members of council, and I guess I'll start with this item. And I would probably want to ask the members of council, who didn't have gray hair when we started down the path of getting our two-town ditch project started? So I'm happy to announce that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has provided the city with an invalidated permit for work associated with the two-town stream restoration project. The city is simply required to sign it and return it, and along with providing a draft of the conservation easement, which we agreed to provide as part of that permit before it will be validated. So a little bit of paperwork ahead of us, but we got it. So timing is perfect on that, because we did open bids today on the work associated with the two-town project, as well as Springbrook Gardens, and the engineers still reviewing those, but they look favorable at this point. So happy to get that moving this fall. So
Madam President?
finally.
Just a quick comment. Obviously, we went to Washington, council went face-to-face with the Corps, but in the end, I think we have to thank Congressman Joyce and Senator Portman for stepping in on our behalf to help accelerate the situation that at one point was, just nowhere, and I want to thank them. They were very instrumental, and of course, our tenacity on both sides of council and the administration to get this done, so it'll be a great asset for that area.
Absolutely. Which included a trip to Buffalo with
Yeah,
Councilman
forgot that
Landig as
too.
recently
Yeah.
as last fall, right? Or
We'll be ready to go again for Rice.
Yes, yes. So that's one we can check off finally. Mentor's annual trick or treat will be on Halloween night, Tuesday, October 31st, from 6 to 8 p.m. During these times, the police department will be fully staffed. Also, children should be dressed, and we always encourage children to be dressed in high-visibility clothing or to carry a light while they are out. Parents are reminded to check all candy when they return home as well. Mentor Police Department has once again received a grant for the Victims of Crime Act, or the VOCA grant, in the amount of $40,000. The grant is predominantly utilized in the police departments for the victims' advocate's salary, so that there is a person there to represent the victims. The administration would like to thank Firehouse Subs for their generous grant award, and to the Mentor Fire Department the amount of $3,687 to be used for the department's residential smoke detector program. The fire department reminds residents that working smoke detector saves lives, and if you can't afford a smoke detector, or you just need assistance in checking on whether or not yours are functioning, please call 974-440-974-5768, and our fire department will help get you in the right direction. Mentor Avenue widening contractor has begun construction on the north side of Mentor Avenue. Removal of pavement and sidewalk began at the western end of the project and is progressing eastward. Two-way traffic will be maintained during the entirety of that construction project. The annual chili cook-off is this Friday, October 20th, from 11:30 to 1 p.m. at the Mentor Senior Center. It is being sponsored by our Senior Center and the Association of Specialists for Aging Adults. Tickets can be purchased for $4 in advance or at the door, and lunch includes salad, chili, of course, and dessert. Mysteries of the Manor Trail will take place this weekend on Friday and Saturday evenings from 6:30 to 8:30 at the Wildwood Cultural Center. You can call 440-974-5735 for information and required registration. And Mr. Kaminsky, it seems to me that sells out every year, right? So they might want to do that soon.
Yes, absolutely. As of this morning, we already had 250, and we max out at 325.
It's a fantastic program for families.
Wow.
Saturday's Pumpkin Derby Day event has been canceled, right? So sorry about that. The Buckeye State Sled Hockey Tournament will be held at the Mentor Ice Arena on Sunday, October 21st. Teams from Ohio, New York, and Pittsburgh will also be here. The games start on Saturday from 9 until 6 p.m. and also on Sunday from 8 a.m. until 2 p.m. And then finally, want to recognize and thank two new businesses that are invested in our community: Fuji Buffet and Grill at 9130 Mentor Avenue, and Hibbett Sports at 7850 Menor Avenue. And we thank them and wish them all the success in their endeavors here in our community. That's all.
Thank you. Clerk's correspondence? I have none. Okay, commission and committee reports. Council is in receipt of the meeting minutes of the Board of Building and Zoning Appeals from September 12, 2017. Old business? None? New business? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to persons before council. We would ask that you come up and identify yourself, name and address, and there is a 4-minute time limit, so we will try to adhere to that closely this evening. So the first person to speak is Deborah McCauley.
Good evening, Deborah McCauley, 6730 Farmingdale Lane of Mentor. Need a little tech assistance here.
Yeah, we won't get you started until you're set to go. Okay.
My friend's dog, cute, isn't she? Okay. Sorry, it's taking a little longer than it does at home. Okay, this is Osborne Farms. This is located at the southeast corner of Route 615 and Interstate 90, heading eastbound. This entire photograph is all in Kirtland Hills. The driveway, pretty much the only part that we're going to be talking about this evening, well, that we need to focus on, is not shown in this photograph, but that is an issue, that the driveway is accessible through Kirtland Hills only. This is a front portion of the barn. These barns were looked at. They are historical barns. They're recognized with the Ohio Historic Inventory. This particular barn was built in 1940. It's a Wisconsin dairy barn with English revival features. This is the back side of the barn, or kind of side view of the barn. This is the caretaker's home/barn, also described by the Ohio Historic Inventory as an unusual English revival structure. Same building side view. This is what happens at Osborne Farms. I helped bring this foal into the world. This is Big Man. His register name is Big Sweep Osborne. This is the day after he was born. He goes out into the foaling pasture. The foaling pasture is what we're talking about developing. They stay out in the foaling pasture until they're ready to be introduced into the larger population herd of horses. As you can see, 3 of the foals are getting a little bit bigger in front of the back of the barn. There they are, even bigger, playing with each other. They're in the main herd. They're now horses. They load on a trailer, and then they then become racing horses, harness horses. It's been going on in this farm. This horse is 28 years old. That's Majestic Osborne. He had made over $750,000 in his 6-year career. He's the patriarch of the farm, just like Ace Osborne was the patriarch of the estate. Butch, I want to go back to this real quick. He's going to be pushing up daisies pretty soon. Not by his choice. Bullet will be the next alpha horse in his place. This is just an example of how much the people on the farm care about what happens to the farm. That little piece of tape is to show that the killdeer lay their eggs in the gravel driveway every summer in the same spot to avoid running them over with the tractor. the spot is marked and they are conserved. There's the eagle's nest, far right-hand corner. That's a view of the sun setting. It's really very pretty. The eagle's nest happens to be empty at that particular point in time, but I thought it was a great shot anyway, along with that one. This is an important photograph right here. This is the very far back of the property. The property is divided into pretty much two sections. There's a large ravine about 30 feet deep to the left of the fence. I couldn't really take a picture of it. It's too dark. Apologize for the delay. That ravine is a watershed, and at the very end of the, tucked way back in the property.
Deborah, you have 1 minute remaining.
Okay, this is the well house, the only source of water for the 90 acres on the farm. The pump is also recognized with the National Historic Survey. Again, the frontage. I'm trying to show this is where, how close the structure, which we don't know what it's going to be. Is it a hotel? Is it a restaurant? How tall is it? How big is it? This is the proximity to the barns. Again, from in the barn, we're looking at maybe a structure this big. Who knows? Nothing's been submitted. We don't have any particular plans. I'm going to skip through the video since I'm short with time, but this is what it sounds like on Osborne Farm. The bridge that this truck will be going over is the freeway interchange that we put in. I've been told that it's a new bridge. The ribbon cutting ceremony was in 2003. That makes it 14 years old. It's not a new
Deborah?
interchange by any means.
Deborah, you need to wind up.
Okay, that's last but not least. I'm asking with this photograph, please help maintain the integrity of the farm. Any of the historic property that could and would be registered will not be accepted by the National Register as if it is obscured by a hotel. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. The next speaker is Lynette Swopes. Please come forward and state your name and address.
Good evening, Madam President, fellow city council members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lynette Swopes, and I am a recruiter from the Philadelphia Regional Office of the Census Bureau. And I'm here because we are hiring for a position as a field representative, a couple of them in Lake County. And the job pays $12.53 to $14.63 an hour, but here in Lake County, the rate is $13.04 with 53.5 cents mileage for reimbursement. I'm here for our current surveys. A lot of people, when I talk about our jobs, people always assume that we're preparing, well, we are preparing for the 2020 census, but this particular job is for our current survey programs. A lot of people don't know that the Census Bureau is responsible for all the major economic indicators such as the Consumer Price Index, unemployment rates, housing starts, a lot of crime and health statistics as well. But people don't recognize the Census Bureau and all of that is because we are the agency that collects the data but turns it over to the respective federal agency that crunches the numbers and releases the data that we've come to know and love. So the requirements of the job are just very simple. You have to be 18 years of age. You have to have a valid driver's license and access to an insured vehicle. And the job is only 20 to 30 hours a week. And I'm just coming to you today to ask if I was able to leave some literature with your office, or I could even email a flyer to distribute to the town, to this area. So hopefully we could do that. And again, we are needing people in Lake County. And there's a test that has to be taken. And there's also a two-part interview that is conducted once a person takes the test. The test is very easy. It's just a basic skills test, reading comprehension, math, your ability to read maps, and again, there's 2 interviews upon passing the test. And anyone who is interested in taking the test, there's a number to dial, 866-564-5420, and again, that's on the flyer. And you have to be available days, evenings, and weekends, and it's a nice job for retirees, someone who wants to work part-time, you could work a full-time job and still do this. And again, because it's only 20 to 30 hours a week. So hopefully I would be able to leave this information with you all, and hopefully that we'll have some people that are interested in working the position. If anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Thank you.
No? Okay, thank you. Certainly.
What is the length of the employment?
The employment is for a year. It's a temporary position. It used to be a permanent position, but the new administration made it now a temporary position. So the position lasts for a year, and there's a possibility to be extended for another year. So it is, again, temporary.
Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you very much.
Perfect job for a retiree.
Thank you.
23 hours a week.
Our final speaker this evening is John Lesnick. Please come forward and identify yourself.
Council, administration, and public. My name is John Lesnick. I live on St. James Drive in Mentor, Ohio. I am really confused about issues on the ballot, and a number of people that we've been listening to are probably as confused or more confused than I am. And I know a lot of people are confused about some of the state issues that are there. Looking at some issues that are on the ballot, there's one issue on the ballot that says, wow, a renewal, no increase. Shouldn't be too confusing. Another issue on the ballot says this is a replacement with the same 1.5 mil. Another one on the ballot says a renewal, if I'm not mistaken, says it's a 0.07 mil being increased by a 0.04 mil to increase it to a 1.1 mil. Is that a renewal or a replacement? There's another one that says something about 0.05 being increased by a 0.03. Is that a replacement or a renewal? People, I hope, public would understand, as we've been finding out, there are, in my opinion, that I've heard, there's 3 types of levies that go on the ballot. You have a new levy when it's proposed. You have a renewal levy, which is based on one you already have. Now, replacement levy, from what I understand, replaces any renewal levies that you had. So a new levy means increase in taxes. Renewal levy, which it stated no increase. And I believe a replacement levy is an increase. People don't seem to understand this. And then when they get a bill, all I hear from people all over is, wow, my taxes went up. Well, if you don't understand the 3 levies, I guess you're going to find out your taxes are going up when there's every replacement levy. In looking at papers that are received from Mentor, these are statements that are made like that. If there is a replacement levy compared to a renewal levy that says there is no increase on a renewal, why doesn't it say there's an increase on a replacement to let the public know what is going on about the levies, that there will be an increase in taxes? The verbiage is never stated that way to say an increase. It will state the same 1.5 mil. It will state no increase, but there's never one that I've ever seen that says it will be an increase. And people are always so confused about it to say, why are my taxes going up? Well, when they vote on a replacement levy, you're going to find out your taxes are going up. Okay, renewal, oh yeah, there's no increase, so there shouldn't be no complaints about that for sure. But anyhow, I think a lot of people are confused, and I know even the state issues, when you look at them, you have people, so much on the issues there about spending money to say no and spend money to say yes. So people really are confused about issues, and I think it would be very nice for people that do put things as issues that it would state no increase, and the other ones should state it is an increase. Then people should understand the levies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Second.